Hey everybody, welcome to my video series on learning Maya for beginners. Today I wanted to talk about setting a project in Maya and why this is an important thing to do. Maya has a unique way of kind of organizing its files that's really helpful for larger projects. I've just created a little example folder to show you what these generally look like. But if you first open Maya, usually it'll put it inside Documents. You'll have a folder called Maya, and it's going to set up what it calls a default workspace. And if you go inside that, you'll have a few more options than this. I just went bare bones, but Projects is where you're going to start saving out the different projects you're working on. The reason they did this is you're not just doing one thing in Maya. You're not only modeling and that's it. You might be texturing or exporting renders or even adding audio to animations, all sorts of things that you can be doing. So I'm going to go into this ball bounce folder that I've created, assuming I was creating a project or working on an animation for a bouncing ball, and look at some of the folders that you might be using. So the one you're probably going to be dealing with the most, at least at the beginning of a project, is Scenes. This is where you will store the actual save files of the Maya project. So in this case, I always iterate, so I've done 001. I probably used to have a 002 and then a 003. Sometimes I'll go back through old projects and delete out things I don't need. And this is actually the file for the rig that I was using for this animation. So I found this rig, look it up, it's great. And that's what I wanted to use. So I put this into the folder even before I was working in Maya, really, just to make sure that I had everything where I wanted it to be. Now I clicked back. Next thing I wanted to look at, source images. This is where you're going to put textures. So in this case, I wanted to paint a target on a wall. So that was going to be a texture I was going to attach. So I put any textures into my source images. This is also a place for reference images if you're going to use those. The next, let's go to images. This is where you'll save out renders. So you can see I've got a rendered sequence. We can see the little target here. This is the texture I was looking at earlier. And it looks like I called this blur test. I think I was trying to see what my motion blur was going to look like. So running a few tests here. Next, movies I use a fair amount. This is where I'll save out the actual movie file, and even the very final finished project I'll put in here just for my own organization. Some of these others you'll start using for different reasons, and sometimes you'll end up in a company where they'll have customized these according to their pipeline and their workflow. But this is how you want to start using this. Sound, you'll see, is another one that I use frequently. But you want to start using this for each of your projects so you can contain everything within that project in this file structure. So the question is, how do you create this? So we're in Maya. If you go to File, Project window, you'll see that it has a current project you're working on, and then we have kind of all these folders that we can essentially rename if we wanted to, change up if we wanted to. And all you have to do is hit New, give it a name, and then that will show up in your folders. That will pop up as a new project. So when I created the ball bounce one, I just hit New, came in here and typed ball bounce. I usually name these with specific naming conventions, so I'll tend to put today's date, and I always go day, month, year, and I spell out the month. So if this were today's date, since it's September 8th, I would say 08 SEP for September 20. You don't want to use slashes in here, else you're going to get subfolders. That's not something you want. I'm going to hit cancel. I don't need to create a new one, but that's how you'll get a new folder that has all of those defaults. So you don't have to go in and create each new folder because that would be way too time consuming. So it'll do all of that for you. Now, the next step that you need to do is every single time you open up Maya, the way that I like to do it, instead of a lot of people, they'll have the folders on their computers and you'll just double click into a project, double click into what you were working in yesterday, and it will open up Maya with that scene. I just like to open up Maya by itself so that I can make sure I go to File and Set Project. Because when you do this, it's going to essentially pull up your projects. So you'll have a whole list of all the projects that you've been working on, and you tell Maya which one you want to be using. So if I had just created a new one that was for a walk cycle or something, I would click on that new one. And when you do this, Maya starts working in a way where it can read into all these folders for exactly whatever purposes you want it to. So if I set the project to ball bounce, then whenever I'm in Maya, if I were to go to File, Open, it will take me right into the Maya Projects, Ball Bounce, Scenes folder, because Scenes is where it's going to store all of the files I probably want to open. If I were in the Hypershade, which we'll talk about later for texturing, and I wanted to add a texture onto a shader, I would click into the option to add a file, and it's immediately going to take me to the Maya Projects, Ball Bounce, Source Images folder, because it knows that that is where I should be storing everything for this project. Same thing when you render something out. If you render it as a sequence, it's going to go directly into the Maya Projects, Ball Bounce, Images. And if you don't set your project, then you're probably saving things into the wrong folder. I have a lot of people who will just leave it to default, and then if you look at their default folder, they have all these different files, all these different projects, and it just gets chaotic. So you want to organize these as best as possible. It's going to be good for sharing files as well. If you ever need to hand this over to someone else within your team, maybe you're working as a modeler and you're handing it over to the texture artist, everything needs to stay in proper organization so that anyone who touches it has full access to everything that they need to. So don't forget, you always want to set your project when you open up Maya, so Maya knows which project you're working on, and then everything should work smoothly from there. Okay, I will see you next time.